So behind me is a thrift store find Atari 2600. I picked it up at a local thrift store for about $18. And I would love to power it up with you and find out if it works. That video is coming, so if you want to see it, click the subscribe button. Looking at the controllers, it got me to thinking that we have one more upgrade to do to the C64 that literally everybody's been asking for and nobody has done. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to take the C64 joystick and turn it into any retro joystick you want it to be. I'm Mr. Gigabytes, and this is Gigabytes Technology. I'm going to show you how to mod the C64 joystick so that you can use any retro joystick you want. The first thing we'll have to discuss is we have multiple different types of joysticks. This one is the C64 joystick. This is the C64 Mini joystick. Now, a lot of you may have broken versions of this. I don't happen to have a broken version of it, but regardless, whether it's broken or not, you're going to want to modify the joystick in a way that is non-destructive. So you're definitely going to want to modify the joystick in a way that still allows you to use the joystick buttons and things like that. So what I've come up with is we're going to use one of these. And this is just a 9-pin male with screw type connections on the back. Now you can get one of these in a solder type connection. That's perfectly fine. But I find this is going to be easier to work with and reconfigurable if you have a particular joystick that isn't, say, Atari or Commodore compatible. Or if you have a joystick with an extra button or two that you may want to wire into to activate one of these other buttons. Now, there is a difference, an obvious difference between these two joysticks. Now let's go ahead and take these apart real quick. Now the first thing you're going to notice is the micro switch joystick actually has this daughter board that everything plugs into, and that is to support the switches and whatnot. This is actually easier to modify because what we're going to do is we're just going to take Cat5 cable and we're just going to solder it to the various connectors. So you would solder your down wire to down and your right wire to right, your left wire to left, and so on and so forth. And you'd only have to solder your ground wire to ground. Now your fire button, both of the fire buttons are the same, essentially. And so you would just solder your fire button to one of these right sides. The other thing the C64 has got going for it, which makes it a lot easier, is it doesn't have this middle support. It clutters up things. So you would actually have, if you wanted to mount this inside the joystick, you could do that. And it's a little easier doing it this way. You might have to remove one of these weights, and you could do it on either side and you'd have plenty of room. Now you can do the same thing on the C64 Mini joystick, but it gets a little bit crowded. But You do have a little bit of room up here to work with. This would fit in there just fine. It's just a little tighter of a space is all. But you really couldn't mount it back here or back here, but either side here would work. But we're not going to do that today. I want to do this the absolute simplest way we possibly can on the C64 Mini joystick that I've already modified to do micro switches. I figure I've already modified it anyway. What the heck, let's modify it a little more. Now, one of the things I've done already was to drill a hole up front, and that was for another project another modification that didn't quite work out. So I've already got the hole drilled. We might have to make that a little bit bigger depending on the size of the Cat 5 we're going to use. And I'm just going to use this piece of Cat 5 that I just happen to have lying around. We don't need a lot of it. So what I'm going to do is we're going to trim this to length. So we're just going to cut the end off. And I want a little bit of a pigtail. I'm going to make that hole a little bit bigger. And there we go. We've got a good fit there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strip back this cable a little bit. And I'm going to go fairly far back. We just want to get this outer sheath off and expose these wires. And we're going to separate them out. Now for this particular installation, we're only talking about 4 directions plus fire. So we really only need 5 of these wires. And they're all copper. Doesn't really matter how you choose your wires. We're going to use our orange-white for fire. We're going to use brown for down. We're going to use blue for left, orange for right, and green for up. Should be easy to remember that way. So we'll need, beyond those 5 wires, we're going to need a ground wire. And I'm going to use the brown-white wire for ground. So the green-white and the blue-white will not be used. And we can just go ahead and trim those off. So the other thing we're going to need to do is we have to prep the other side. What I'm going to do, this came with an external case that I am going to use. Just got to find the right grommet here. So I'm going to trim the jacket off of here as well. But I'm not going to trim as much, so we just have to trim it back to here, roughly. And again, we just want to cut just deep enough to get to the wires and separate them. Now this external case just pops open like that. This will set inside like so, and that'll close around the grommet here. Now put that on backwards, so we're going to flip that around real quick. This ringed part is the strain relief, and this wider part here actually will get put inside the case just like that. I'm going to pull this out real quick, and I'm going to strip these wires back. You don't need a lot, just a little bit, maybe about 1/4 of an inch. So now we need a little screwdriver. 1, 2, 3, 4 our direction, 6 is fire, 8 is our ground. So those are the ones we need to loosen up. So green is up, that goes in pin 1. Brown is down, that goes in for pin 2. Blue is left, and that is number 3. Orange is right, so that is number 4. Now for our other 2, brown, white is ground, which is number 8. And our fire button is number 6. Again, it doesn't really matter what color wires you use as long as they match at both ends. I'm just using this color code because it's easy to remember. Now, the more observant folks will notice that we have a ground on here on this block, But that's a shield ground. The shield ground won't do us much good because the ground pin has to be pin 8 for the joystick to work. The other thing is that we've got, you know, pins 5, 9, and 7 that are all not used. Oh, pin 5 is the potentiometer, which isn't going to work in this particular mod. Pin 7 is a 5 volt, positive 5 volts, which also isn't going to do us any good. And pin 9 is the other potentiometer. None of those pins are going to do us any good in this particular situation. We are limited to one button for this mod, which shouldn't be that big of a deal. You know, most Commodore joysticks, you know, retro joysticks are going to be a single button anyway, whether they have two or not. Push this up here, close that down, there we go. So we've got the outside completely done. Now, what we need to do is we'll have to remove this circuit board, which means removing these 4 screws. Now, while I wanted to do this relatively easily, I did want to show you the example of the most difficult way, the most difficult joystick to do this on, because the other joystick, it's super easy. You'll make quick work of it. But I wanted to show the more difficult version of this mod on camera. Be careful not to spill any of the buttons there. Now, this one's going to look a little different because we did a non-solder joystick mod that put switches in for these little membrane pieces. And what we'll need to do, we have to first thread this through our hole, and I'm just going to move it all the way up like that. So I've got plenty of slack to work with. Now, I'm going to point out, now hopefully you can see this on camera, there are little solder pads all over this place, all over this circuit board. And the ones that we're mainly concerned with are the ones nearest the silk screen here. So this one's 5 volts. That's a 5 volt takeoff. One of these is, we'll use one of these for the fire buttons. This one here is for this button. This one is for this button. This one is for this button. And this one is for this button. So we've got down, up, right, and left. And so that's what we're going to solder our wires to. Now I'm going to try and tin the pads here. We'll see how well this works out. Now let's get this up in the air. The rubber tines on the back are getting in the way a little bit. Not expertly done, but it will do. Now the ground is right here, so we'll go ahead and get that pad tinned as well. Alright, let's see if tinning the wires will help us out any. Go. That's one. There we go. That's down. This is why we wanted lots of slack in this. Go up. And a fire button. There we go. Okay, so the issue is we don't have enough of this stripped back yet. The biggest issue I'm having right now is the wires don't really want to stay in place because it's a stranded cable, and I did not anticipate that, and it's knocking out all of my previous mods on this board. If I would have used a solid core wire, they would have stayed in place while we try to mount these. The downside is I may have broken my modded joystick, and that would definitely, well, not be great, but this mod works. Won't really need those switches. Alright, now let's pull this through. Well, still feels like it's going to work. Alright, I'm going to go ahead. Normally I would just test this, put it together temporarily, but let's get the screws out and get this screwed back together. This would definitely be easier on the newer joystick. However, I can pick one of these up with the C64 Mini for about 25 bucks at my local department store right now. So maybe a little extra labor, a little extra pain is worth it to save a few dollars. But yeah, definitely strip back twice as much as I did initially. Separate those wires out nice and wide. And it would have been better if this particular cable would have been a solid core cable, solid wire instead of stranded. But we got it together and we'll see if it works. Okay, so I've just got we're going to try just a regular Atari joystick in this. Well, I do have left, no right, down, up. Oh, there we go. Right's working. This particular joystick must not be a very good joystick. It is working. I've got fire button. Excellent. Let's try a better joystick. This is that Atari 2600 that I found at a thrift store, and this is one of the joysticks that came with it. How about a slightly newer Atari joystick? One that isn't 40 years old. This one came with a Atari Flashback 7. Now this should be pin compatible with the original Atari. We'll see. Yeah, that works a lot better. So, try one more joystick. As long as we're on a roll. This is a special gamepad for the Commodore. It's an NES style gamepad. But it's got the 9-pin connector there. So let's see how this works. This is brand new. It's never been used. Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. That's good. That's interesting. That 2 button is up. So let's see if the joystick still works. Yep, sure does. So all the buttons still work on this on the joystick, and we've got buttons over here. So good news is, the good news is that pretty much any retro, you know, a Atari Commodore compatible joystick with the C64, or really any USB device. So you can use your old Atari joystick on your PC, really. And that's absolutely fantastic. This is really good news for anybody who wants to go through that process to put this mod in, and it won't destroy the joystick. But hey, if you've got a joystick that's already broken anyway, well, why not try this mod out and do it that way? You know, put that broken joystick to use, dig that out of the garbage, and make it happen. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. So behind me is a